So in this video, we're going to be talking about 5th century Athens, a time of great change and transformation, a time for which Athens is best known. And so it's striking that this is a period in which Athens is experiencing its most extreme turmoil and transformation. So here's a quick overview to sort of put everything together. A lot of the things that are discussed in terms of classical Athens, of 5th century Athens, are often considered separately, and so it's important to remember that all of this is happening at the same time. We have the advent of democracy, which is associated with the reforms of Cleisthenes, the introduction of sortition, and the reestablishment of the non-geographic tribes and so forth. Athens becomes a radical democracy right around the turn of the century, and almost immediately thereafter we have the intense crisis of the Persian invasions. And so this is a huge turning point for all of Greece, including the Athenians, and out of this comes Athens' new hegemony, its new military leadership of the Greek world, and the increasing polarization, the increasing animosity between Athens and Sparta's allies. This is all under the heading of the Delian League, the alliance that is formed under Athens' leadership after the Persian invasions. And this dominates the political and military scene in the Greek world for the whole rest of the 5th century, and leads us to the climax of the Peloponnesian Wars, the wars between the Greeks themselves. The First Peloponnesian War, or also known as the Undeclared War, is a series of conflicts that takes place in the middle of the century, and then comes the Great Peloponnesian War, the Peloponnesian War that everybody knows about, the life or death struggle for between Sparta and Athens over the very idea of the direction of Greek society, of the definition of the ideal Greek community. The leadership figures in Athens during this period are part of the movement toward the acceleration toward climax and disruption. And so the key figures that we see are Themistocles, who is an important figure during the Persian invasions. Themistocles is the one that helps to put Athens on a naval footing, and prepares Athens to fight back at sea against the Persians during Xerxes' invasion. Themistocles' adversary is a man named Cimon, and this is showing how Athens is, even though Athens is a pure democracy, and even though Athens isn't supposed to have important leaders, it has still, nonetheless, influential figures, partly because the Board of Strategoi, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, allows for people to persist in the public eye for year after year. Themistocles and Cimon give way to Pericles, who dominates the century, who remains on the Board of Strategoi for decades, and becomes one of the pillars of Athenian community, even though he has no direct political power. He is a statesman that all of the Athenians turn to because of his constant central presence in the Athenian community. After Pericles dies during the Peloponnesian War, the mantle is taken up by Cleon. Cleon is not as adept as Pericles. He's a more polarizing figure. He has the disadvantage of attempting to follow this hugely defining act of Pericles, and so Cleon ends up being a very despised or controversial figure during the Peloponnesian War itself. It's under Pericles, in association with the Delian League, that money from the Delian League is diverted to Athens itself, rather than to the war against the Persians. And the direct outcome of this, and the symbol of this, is the construction of the Parthenon, the great temple of of Athena that is built on the Acropolis that dominates Athens to this day. At the same time, we have a remarkable flourishing of the arts, in particular the lyrical arts. So we have Pindar is establishing a transformation in poetry, and out of this and out of religious festivals and increasing desire to for performance, for poetry and these kinds of things to be interactive with the audience that they're performed for. We have the emergence of tragedy. Tragedy begins with Aeschylus and other figures that are dominant in the middle of the century, and after them comes Sophocles and Euripides. From the huge success, the huge impact of tragedy, we have an offshoot called comedy, and comedy begins to flourish in the middle of the century, but reaches its greatest point with the advent of the best known and most proficient practitioner of the arts, Aristophanes, during the period of the Peloponnesian War. At the same time, we also have the flourishing of philosophy. So in the previous century, we had Pythagoras, and in this century, we have Protagoras. Protagoras is representative of the debate between Nomos and Physis, which we'll talk about in a minute. Out of that debate comes Protagoras' adversary, Socrates. And Socrates' student is Plato. Socrates and Plato's depiction of Socrates dominates philosophy forever after. And again, Socrates flourishes during the time of the Peloponnesian War. The greatest works of art and the greatest works of both visual art and lyrical art, performance art, and the greatest works of philosophy, rhetoric, oratory, all of the massive contributions of Athens. The greatest example of these take place against the background of the Peloponnesian War. So the Athenian democracy, as it exists during this period, can be broken down in the following ways. We have a citizen assembly, which is the citizens themselves coming together to decide issues, to elect officers, magistrates, and so forth. This is the Athenian citizen body themselves. The agenda for the assembly and the sort of the operation, the execution of the laws that the assembly pass goes to the council, and this is the contribution of Cleisthenes. This is what establishes Athens as a democracy. Before this, the council is made up of nobles that have to belong to the greatest families, the Eupatric families, and this is stifled. The movement toward the people having power for themselves, the empowerment of the people in Athens, the scrapping of the old council and the creation of this new council that is chosen entirely by lot, entirely by random sortition, means that the council is also a clump of the citizen body, chosen at random, serving only for a year, and therefore as democratic as possible. The officials, the magistrates, the main magistrates that see to the day-to-day administration of the city are also chosen by lot from amongst the citizen body. The main thing that offers an opportunity to deviate from democracy is the military magistrates, the strategoi. The board of strategoi is made up of 10 individuals that are elected by the assembly from among candidates who have experience in military matters, and they are allowed to be re-elected. And so this means that all of the other aspects of Athenian democracy, the council is people who serve at random, chosen by lot only for a year. The archons are chosen by lot and serve only for a year. Everything about the Athenian state is random, anonymous citizens. The exception to this is the Board of Strategoi. The Board of Strategoi is made up of people that can remain in place from year to year, that have influence gained by their continued service, their contributions to the defense of Athens, and so forth. And this means that people that persist on the Board of Strategoi, even though they don't have political power, even though they are not in charge of the city, their only powers as one of 10 generals on this board that has authority only in military matters. Nonetheless, these are the people that have faces because they're there from year to year and gain informal, behind-the-scenes influence and following. So this is how, even in the age of democracy of Athens, in which we have a pure radical democracy with no kings, no rulers, no tyrants, no nothing, we still call this the age of Pericles, because Pericles is there at the center of it all. He has no official power, but the people of Athens know him. They see him as a pillar of the community, and they turn to him when there are problems, when there are important questions to be decided, especially in times of crisis. Pericles picks this up from Themistocles does this even earlier. As one of the saviors of Athens, as a result of his campaign for naval power before the invasion of Xerxes. So this is one of our dilemmas: is that Athens is a pure democracy, and yet it's still able to develop influential figures. It's able to develop followings. It's able to develop a sense of partisanship. This is one of the problems with democracy in general. If you think about the potential pitfalls of democracy, if you have pure democracy, if everybody is able to participate, and the things are accomplished by means of making speeches and persuading the audience of Athenian citizens, then a premium is placed on the ability to persuade. A premium is placed on the ability to speak effectively. And the dark side of this is the ability to speak effectively regardless of merits. This is the ability to speak effectively, even if you are speaking in terms of your own, your own goals, your own agenda. If you can persuade the people, you can gain for yourself. You can divide the Athenian people into people that are persuaded by you and those that are not. Pure democracy opens up the opportunity for faction, division, for conflict within a broken society. It opens up the opportunity for demagogues, people that get their own way by being persuasive to large numbers of citizens. It opens up the opportunity, even without that, for the simple problem of tyranny of the majority, where the needs of the largest number of voters that can pass something override what might be the very different needs of minority groups of citizens. If you've studied the American Revolutionary War, you'll have encountered these problems with the arguments of the Federalists, and the urge to move away from the empowerment of the masses. This is one of the things that people are aware of and concerned about when it comes to democracy. Even elements that seem to be useful at first, like ostracism. This is the ability once a year to choose a member of society that is counterproductive, that is divisive, that is bad for Athens, and choose to exile him. Ostracism is over a relatively short period of time becomes a tool for people to try to get rid of their political enemies. And so what we're looking at here is an ostracism shard. When people are voting, they write down the names of people from among the candidates that are offered, of people that they think should be exiled, should be ostracized. And here we're looking at Pericles is the first name on the list. This is, an attempt at ostracism that is engineered by one of Pericles' political enemies. Uh, and so, here's the point, that even the attainment of an idealized system like the pure democracy of Athens, as envisioned by Cleisthenes, opens itself up to the problems that are inherent in human nature, the problems that are inherent in the desire for what you can have for yourself as an individual, as balanced against the needs of the community. And so this takes us back to the very first theme of the course, the dynamic between the desires and needs of the individual and the stability and strength of the community, which are almost mutually exclusive. The place on the spectrum between them is something that all of the Greek polis are experimenting with. And the Athenian creation of democracy is an extreme. It happens only in Athens. Athens believes that it has achieved its ideal society through the final installation of the pure empowerment of the people. But even this it opens itself up to new ways of corruption of the community. And we'll continue this in the next video.